The phone rang at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was sleeping deeply. The kind of sleep that only comes after days of exhaustion, when the body finally surrenders and the mind disappears into darkness. The world felt distant, muted, unreal. And then the sound cut through everything. Sharp, persistent, demanding. I reached for the phone with my eyes still closed, my hands searching blindly in the dark. When I finally brought the screen close enough to see the name, my heart stopped. It was my head of security. He never calls at that hour unless something is very wrong. I answered. His voice was calm, controlled. The voice of a professional delivering information he wishes he didn't have to deliver. But beneath that control was tension, urgency, weight. What he told me in the next 60 seconds shattered my world. I won't share the details. Some things must remain protected, but I can tell you this. It was the kind of news that makes your blood turn cold. The kind that freezes time, the kind that makes the room feel smaller, darker, closer. When the call ended, I sat there in silence. My wife stirred beside me. She could hear it in my voice. Something was terribly wrong. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And in that moment, something far deeper than fear began to rise. Doubt. Not doubt in people, not doubt in systems, but doubt in God. Where was he? Where was the protection I had prayed for? Where was the safety I had asked him to place over those I love? I had prayed faithfully, specifically, consistently. And now this. That night became the longest night of my life. Not because of what was happening around me, but because of what was happening inside me. My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am the president of Burkina Faso. But that night, none of that mattered. I was not a president. I was not a commander. I was not a leader of millions. I was just a man, alone in the darkness, wrestling with his faith, hoping that the God he had trusted for years was still listening. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand something. You need to understand who I was before that phone call. Because faith that has never been tested is very different from faith that has survived the fire. Before that night, I believed my faith was strong, not perfect, but real. I had walked with God for many years. I prayed daily, I read scripture, I sought his guidance not only in major decisions, but in the quiet, ordinary moments of life. My faith was not a public performance. It was private, personal, foundational. When I became a leader, that faith became even more essential. Leadership carries a weight few people ever see. Responsibility does not sleep. Decisions ripple outward, affecting lives you may never meet. Pressure becomes constant. Silence becomes rare. And fear, if you allow it, can slowly take control. Without faith, I don't believe I could have carried that weight. There were moments in the past when I felt God's protection in ways I could not explain. Situations where logic said I should not have made it through, yet I did. Times when I felt completely alone, yet deeply aware that I was not abandoned. These experiences shaped me. They strengthened my confidence in God, or at least I thought they did, because there is a difference between faith that has been experienced and faith that has been tested. It is easy to believe in God's goodness when life is stable. It is easier to trust his plans when outcomes make sense. It is easier to praise when prayers are answered quickly, but faith revealed in calm waters is not the same as faith revealed in the storm. The weeks leading up to that night were relentless. Multiple challenges unfolded at the same time. Security concerns, economic pressure, constant decisions that could not be delayed. Each day brought new urgency. Each night brought new worries. I was sleeping less than 4 hours a night. My body was running on adrenaline. My mind was running on responsibility. My spirit was running on prayer. Still, I kept going. I believed God was with us. I believed these challenges were temporary. I believed his purposes were greater than what I could see. The night before the phone call, I prayed as I always did. I thanked God for his protection. I asked him to watch over my family. I asked him to watch over my nation. I placed the coming day in his hands, and for the first time in days, I slept deeply, completely. My body finally surrendered to exhaustion. I had no idea that within hours, everything I believed about faith would be brought into question. Because sometimes the greatest test does not come when you are prepared. It comes when you are finally at rest. And it does not ask whether you believe in God. It asks whether you will trust him when nothing makes sense. The news was serious, not abstract, not distant, not something that could be postponed or delegated. Someone very close to me was in danger. I won't share names. I won't share locations. I won't share operational details. But I can tell you this: the threat was real, immediate, and deeply personal. This was not a political problem. This was not a leadership problem. This was a human problem. As the words settled in my mind, my body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. My heart began to race. My hands started to shake. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were quietly moving inward. I sat up in bed. My wife was awake now. She looked at me, searching my face for answers I didn't yet have. I tried to speak calmly, but my voice betrayed me. She didn't need details. She understood enough. I ended the call and sat there in the darkness. And that's when the questions came. Not polite questions, not theological ones, raw questions. Where is God in this? Where is the protection I prayed for? Where is the safety I asked him to place over the people I love? I had been specific in my prayers, consistent, sincere. Night after night, I had lifted up this very person before God. I had asked him to guard them, to surround them, to keep them safe. And now this. A thought crossed my mind that I had never allowed myself to think before. Maybe God wasn't listening. Another followed quickly. Maybe prayer doesn't change anything. And then the most dangerous thought of all. Maybe the faith I built my life on was just a comforting idea, not reality. I want to be honest with you here. These thoughts didn't make me evil. They didn't make me weak. They made me human. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is often what faith feels like when it is under pressure. The real question is not whether doubt appears. The real question is what you do when it does. That night, I stood at a crossroads. I could let the doubt consume me. I could turn inward, shut down, and harden my heart. I could walk away from everything I claimed to believe. Or I could confront God. Not politely, not carefully, but honestly. I remembered the story of Jacob, wrestling through the night, refusing to let go until he was changed. I realized something then. Faith is not proven by silence. Faith is proven by who you turn to when the silence is unbearable. I got out of bed. I told my wife what little I could. We held each other for a moment. No words, just presence. Then I walked to the small room where I prayed, and there, alone, with no audience and no script, I made a decision. I would not run from God. I would bring everything to him, the fear, the anger, the confusion, and let the struggle happen in his presence, even if it changed me forever. I closed the door behind me. The room was dark, quiet, familiar. I had prayed there countless times before in gratitude and hope and confidence, but this time was different. This time, I had no words prepared. I fell to the floor, not kneeling politely, not standing with folded hands. I went down completely, face to the ground, my body heavy, my breath unsteady, and I prayed. But this was not a careful prayer. It was not respectful in the way religion often teaches respect. It was raw, unfiltered, desperate. I told God I didn't understand. I told him I was afraid. I told him I was angry. I said things I had never allowed myself to say before. Questions I had always pushed away finally broke free. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't match what I believe about you. If you are good, if you are powerful, why is this happening? There was no performance, no attempt to sound faithful, no effort to impress heaven, just honesty. And then, silence. No voice, no sudden peace, no answer. The silence was heavy, thick, almost physical. It pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time stopped behaving normally. I stayed there. My tears soaked into the floor beneath me. My thoughts slowed. My body ached. The danger outside that room was still real. Nothing had changed, except me. In that silence, something unexpected began to happen. Not in my circumstances, but in my memory. Stories I had read long ago came back to me. Job sitting in ashes, faithful even when everything was taken. Abraham, walking up a mountain with no explanation and no guarantee. Joseph, betrayed, imprisoned, forgotten, yet never abandoned. None of them were given full answers in the moment. None of them were spared the pain. But none of them were alone. I realized something on that floor. I was not the first to cry out to a silent heaven. I was not the first to feel abandoned. I was not the first to wonder if God was still there. And they had discovered something I was beginning to understand. God can be silent and still be present. His absence is not proven by quiet. His faithfulness is not measured by comfort. Then in that stillness, I made a decision, not a feeling, a decision. I chose to trust God, not because I knew the outcome, but because I refused to make my faith conditional. I said it quietly, with no certainty and no strength of my own. Even if this ends in pain, I will trust you. The moment I surrendered the outcome, something shifted. The fear did not disappear. The crisis did not end. But peace began to enter the room. Not relief, not happiness, peace. A calm that made no sense. A weight lifted from somewhere deep inside me. I had read about it before. Now I was living it. I stood up slowly. My face was wet. My body was exhausted. But something inside me had changed. The situation outside that room was still dangerous. The risk had not disappeared. Nothing had been resolved yet. But I was no longer ruled by panic. I picked up the phone and began making calls. Teams were assembled. Information was exchanged. Decisions were made. Every step was deliberate, careful, focused. We did everything humanly possible to respond to the situation. But the way I moved through those hours was different. Before, fear had been driving my thoughts. My mind had been racing ahead to worst-case outcomes. My emotions were pulling me in every direction. Now there was order. Not because the storm had passed, but because I had released control over what I could not carry. I was doing my part, and I was trusting God to do His. Throughout the night, updates came in. Some encouraging, some uncertain. Each one required attention. Each one reminded me how fragile everything truly was. Yet beneath the urgency, there was a calm I could not explain. This was not discipline. This was not training. This was not experience. This was something deeper. As the night stretched on, fatigue set in. My body wanted rest, but my mind remained alert. I moved from call to call, from room to room, from decision to decision, steady, grounded. I thought about how strange this felt. I had faced pressure before. I had handled crises before, but never like this. This time, I was not carrying the weight alone. As dawn approached, the sky outside began to shift. Darkness slowly gave way to light, and with that light came news. A breakthrough. Details I cannot share, but enough to say this. The immediate danger had passed. The person I loved was safe. I remember exactly where I was standing when I heard those words. I remember the air leaving my lungs. I remember reaching for a chair because my legs could no longer support me. And then the tears came again. Different tears this time. Not tears of fear, tears of relief, tears of gratitude. I returned to the prayer room. This time, I did not fall to the floor in desperation. I knelt, and I thanked God. Not with many words, not with explanations, just gratitude. But as I knelt there, another thought settled in my heart. The outcome could have been different, and my faith would still have needed to stand. Later that morning, when the urgency had eased and the world began to move again, I found myself thinking about something unexpected. Not about what had happened, but about what could have happened. The outcome had been merciful. The danger had passed. The person I loved was safe. And yet, as relief settled in, a deeper question emerged. What if it hadn't? What if the news I received at dawn had been devastating instead of hopeful? I did not ask this question lightly. I sat with it. I allowed it to take shape, and I realized something that surprised me. I would have been broken. I would have grieved deeply. I would have been shaken in ways I cannot fully describe. But I do not believe my faith would have died, not because I am strong, but because something had already changed in me during that long night. On the floor of that prayer room, I had made a decision that was no longer tied to outcomes. I had surrendered not just my fear, but my expectations. Before that night, my faith had conditions, unspoken ones, unconscious ones. I trusted God as long as He protected what I loved. I believed in His goodness as long as I could see it clearly. I rested in His plans as long as they aligned with mine. I did not say these conditions out loud, but they were there. That night stripped them away. Not gently, not comfortably, but completely. I said to God, "You are God, and I am not. I do not understand your ways. I cannot see what you see, but I will trust you, not because of what you give me, but because of who you are." That surrender did not make life easier, but it made my faith real. I learned something important in those hours. God does not always remove the fire. Sometimes He uses it. He does not always explain. Sometimes He strengthens. He does not always change circumstances. Sometimes He changes us. The peace I experienced that night was not a reward for strong faith. It was a gift for honest surrender, and that gift stayed with me. That night taught me things no book ever could. Not theories, not slogans, but truths learned in the dark. I learned that God is present even when He is silent, not only in victories, not only in answered prayers, but in the moments when heaven feels closed and the ground beneath you feels unstable. He was there on that floor, even when I felt nothing, even when I heard nothing, even when doubt was louder than faith. Silence did not mean abandonment. It meant I was being invited to trust without reassurance. I learned that peace is real, not the kind you create by thinking positively, not the kind that comes when problems disappear. This peace existed alongside fear, alongside uncertainty, alongside pain. It did not remove the storm. It anchored me in it. I learned that prayer is not a transaction. You do not offer faith and receive safety in return. You do not exchange devotion for outcomes. Prayer is relationship. It is coming to God without masks, without strategy, without control. It is telling the truth about where you are, even when that truth is messy, uncomfortable, or unresolved. That night, I prayed the most honest prayers of my life. And God did not give me explanations. He gave me Himself. I also learned something difficult. Easy faith is fragile. Faith that has never been challenged is easily shaken. But faith that has walked through fire carries weight. It has depth. It can stand. Crisis does not create faith. It reveals it. And that revelation is painful, but necessary. I did not become fearless after that night. I became grounded. I did not gain certainty. I gained trust, and that trust has carried me through moments since then that would have undone me before. Now, let me speak to you. I don't know what season you are in as you listen to this. Maybe your life is calm right now. Maybe things are stable. Maybe faith feels easy. But I know this much. The phone will ring. Maybe not at 3 a.m, maybe not as a literal call, but something will happen that shakes what you believe. Something that interrupts your sense of control. Something that forces you to confront the question you can avoid when life is quiet. What do I really trust? When that moment comes, I want you to remember a few things. First, it is okay to doubt. Doubt does not mean you have failed. It does not mean your faith is weak. It means your faith is being invited to grow. Do not pretend to feel what you do not feel. Do not perform strength when your heart is breaking. Bring your real questions to God. He is not threatened by your honesty. Second, decide before the crisis comes. Do not wait until you are overwhelmed to settle what you believe. In the middle of fear, your emotions will speak louder than your reason. But if you have already decided, if you have already chosen to trust God regardless of outcome, that decision will carry you when you cannot carry yourself. Third, do not judge God by your circumstances. Circumstances are temporary. God is not. What looks like abandonment may be protection you cannot yet see. What feels like loss may be shaping something deeper within you. Trust His character when you cannot trace His actions. Fourth, do not waste your pain. Crisis will change you. The only question is how. It can harden you, or it can refine you. Allow it to deepen your compassion. Allow it to strengthen your faith. Allow it to shape you into someone who can stand. Not because life is easy, but because your foundation is strong. You are not alone in this. Every person of faith you admire has faced their own dark night. Every story you draw strength from was written in moments of uncertainty. You are part of that story now, and the same God who carried them will carry you. Today, life has moved forward. The crisis of that night passed. Time continued. Responsibilities returned. New challenges appeared. Some expected, some not. But I did not return to who I was before. Something fundamental changed in me during those hours. My faith no longer depends on explanations. My trust no longer requires certainty. My relationship with God no longer carries conditions. That night did not make me stronger in the way people often mean strength. It made me more honest, more grounded, more aware of my dependence on God. I have faced other difficult moments since then. I have received news that made my heart drop. I have stood at crossroads where no option felt safe or clear, but none of those moments shook me the way that first one did. Not because they were easier, some were harder, but because my foundation had already been tested. Once you have stood in the fire and discovered that God did not leave you, you no longer fear the flames in the same way. You remember the night you thought you would break and didn't. You remember the silence that did not destroy you. You remember the peace that carried you when logic failed. This is the gift of tested faith, not comfort, not certainty, but resilience. I want to be clear about something. I am not saying suffering is good. I am not saying pain should be celebrated. Loss hurts. Fear is real. Grief changes you. But I am saying this. God can redeem anything. He can take the moment that was meant to break you and use it to build something deeper. He can turn fear into trust, confusion into clarity, weakness into quiet strength. That is what he did for me. The phone rang at 3 a.m. to shake my faith. Instead, it refined it. My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am the president of Burkina Faso. But more than that, I am a man who once lay on the floor of a prayer room, uncertain, afraid, and questioning everything, and discovered that God was still there. If your phone rings one day, remember this story. Remember that silence is not absence. Remember that doubt is not the end. Remember that even the darkest night eventually gives way to morning. God is still faithful, even at 3 a.m.